touched by heaven. It's interesting. I find this one fascinating at how people look the other way. Fascinating. And it has to do, and I'm going to tell you a story that you've never heard before, even though it happens every year, and has happened since the beginning of the church. You ready, Gary?
I'm ready. Wait a minute. Is the audience ready? Okay, go ahead.
Okay, everybody settle down out there. Okay, here we go. So, once upon a time, there was one church, and then there was a schism. It divided in the year 1054, and the Roman Catholics went off to Rome, and the Greek Orthodox stayed there in Jerusalem. But it used to be all one, then it split. So in Jerusalem, so the Roman Catholics pretty much started ignoring what they earlier had as a part of their faith. And the Greek Orthodox continue to celebrate something that happens on Orthodox Easter. And if you're Greek Orthodox and you're listening right now, you know exactly what I'm going to talk about and how nobody else pays attention to what happens. Orthodox Easter, which means the Julian calendar stuff, on that Saturday in the afternoon, this has been going on every year for hundreds and hundreds of years. It was first written about in the first few hundred years, the first known writings. I'm sure it happened before that. But this has been going on since then. This is what still happens today. The patriarch of Jerusalem, of the Greek Orthodox faith, goes over to the tomb of Christ, the Holy Sepulchre, which is inside the Church of the Resurrection, I believe. Okay, so the lights are all off inside there. The lights are all off. He's actually patted down by Israeli authorities to make sure he's got nothing on him that could start a fire. They've already checked inside the tomb to make sure there's nothing in there that can either start a fire or be lit on fire. Keep in mind, Gary, this has happened every year for hundreds and hundreds of years. So the patriarch goes into the tomb, and there's thousands of people there. Thousands of people are gathered around there, inside, outside, all over the place. So he's in there, and there's a set of prayers that he prays, and fire comes out of the stone where Jesus was laid every year. And people outside can all of a sudden see the flames. From what I've read and the people I've talked to who have been there up close, sometimes it's described as a fire like a mist that comes off the stone. Then it forms columns. The patriarch has 33 candles in each hand, which represents the age of Christ when he was crucified. Those candles are lit inside. Then he comes out, all the candles lit, the bells start ringing, people start cheering, and then the candle flame goes from one person to another. They start, everyone's got a candle, and so everyone starts lighting each other's candle. But the fire has a personality of its own. For the first few minutes, the fire doesn't burn. Go on to YouTube, look for videos about this miracle of the holy fire, and you'll see people putting the flame to their faces, to their beards. Nothing's catching on fire, nothing's burning, because for the first few minutes it's just warm. And then at some point, a few minutes down the road, it begins to burn. But not only that, the fire starts jumping around on its own. I've heard people have explained to me it's like a laser show where it'll shoot up to a lamp on a wall. It'll shoot across the room to someone else in their candle. And pretty soon the whole place is aglow in candlelight. Then the candlelight is put on planes and goes around the world to all the Greek Orthodox churches. For the first time last year, it came to the U.S. and went to all the different Orthodox churches in this country. I also did a podcast on a miracle that happened in a home where the flame was kept on the stove, and a very cool thing happened, and that's episode 2. And I won't go into all that. It's its own kind of lengthy story. But as I tell you this story, Gary, and this has been going on for hundreds and hundreds of years, and you've never heard it before, have you?
No, I've absolutely not heard it.
I've asked Catholic priests about it, and they go, what? I said, where do you think when you go to an Easter Vigil Mass on a Saturday night and the candle comes into a darkened church and it goes from one candle to another, guess where that started? Guess where that custom began? And they're oblivious. And I'll go to Protestant ministers and they'll go, what happens? Why isn't it that every Orthodox Easter, why in every Christian church, Catholic, Orthodox, Protestant, why doesn't the minister go to the front of the class, go to the podium, the lectern, and say it happened again? I actually called up. Now I'm a Catholic. I'm a proud Catholic. I have I don't want to change anything. I'm happy with where I am. But there's Catholic radio, and I called up Catholic radio, I sent an email. I wanted to be on the air just to say, why don't we celebrate this? And they just wouldn't fully address it. They talked about the different customs and why it's, where it's Orthodox and they celebrate Easter on a certain day and Catholics on another day and all that kind of stuff, but they wouldn't address the fire. Well, because there is no Christianity without the resurrection. There is no Christianity. If Jesus doesn't rise, 2 billion people are not Christian today. That has to happen in order for there to be Christianity. Otherwise, it doesn't matter. And here it is, and although there's plenty of proof to show that there was a resurrection, all the writings and all the apostles, there's just an overabundance of evidence. However, to have this one incredible physical flare gun shot for everybody, Christian, non-Christian alike, to say, look at this. And for Christians to ignore, for all these Christians to ignore, and Christian leaders to ignore, who are you serving? Are you serving the ruler of this world, or are you serving the ruler of our heavenly world? Which ruler are you serving by being quiet about this amazing event? And if they faked that, Gary, if this was just a giant fake job for hundreds and hundreds of years, and somebody found out, the whole church crumbles, because if that's a lie, everything's a lie. But the thing is, it's not a lie. It actually happens. Fire comes out of stone every year, and every single human being should know that story.
Yeah. But then you get into different churches, different beliefs. These ministers come on and say, well, July 22nd, the world's going to come to the end. You need to repent. What can you say about that? I mean,
I know.
But I'm saying you have all these religions, okay? I
35,000 Christians. Yeah, I know.
Yeah,
35,000 Christian sects out there. It's ridiculous.
I believe in God, okay? And I know I'm going to get people mad at me on this. But you take the church, has been probably the most cruelest to human beings of anything, from torturing to all the stuff, in the name of God, in the name of the church. Then you have, and it went on from the very beginning, and it's some of the stuff yet, because I know a priest, and some of the stuff that, he honestly told me, he doesn't believe some of it, flatly doesn't believe it, but he has to, present it. It just, all these religions out there, it's really hard to, how can I say it? There's miracles, yes, and I believe in miracles. But again, you have certain churches, certain beliefs out there that contradict each other drastically. So, I mean,
I think, yeah, I hear you.
In the name of God, in the name of God.
There is, those demons we were talking about, there was infiltration. There was infiltration within the church, without question, question. But what it should boil down to, there is a commonality, though, and that's the resurrection. There is a commonality that it's about love and forgiveness. There are certain things that everybody gets right, because if you are prejudiced, then you're not a Christian. That's just plain and simple. If you act in a prejudicial way, you're not a Christian. It doesn't mean, I go back, I was just thinking about the Baker story out of Colorado right now, and it's like this guy stood up for his principles. He wasn't prejudiced against anybody. He just had his own, his own level that he wouldn't do, he just, because it went against his faith, but he welcomed everybody. And our job is to welcome everybody, into, and to love everybody. Jesus said, big deal, you love your neighbor. Big deal, you love the people that you love, but love your enemy. And if we follow that, to love our enemy and pray for our enemy, then we're on the right course. Anybody who takes you another place, they're on the wrong course. Yeah, there's an infiltration, Gary. There's an evil infiltration, but the basics, the truth, is still there. That fire still happens. It's still about love. There's some There are some boring homilies out there, but there's never a boring Eucharist. Not when you know what it really is. So there are a lot of failed priests, and there are a lot of heavenly priests. It's like anything else. Like anything else. Some really did receive a calling, and some picked a job. So my hunch is that the priest that you're talking about, it wasn't a calling. It was just the way to go for whatever his reason, whatever. So,
it could be. I mean, a lot of people, they figure, I want to be a doctor, or I want to be a lawyer, or I want to be a minister, or I want to be a priest. And then they get into it, and they realize that wasn't what they really wanted, but they just go along with it.
Yeah. I mean, I've met some nuns in my life too. And it's like, who is your role model? Holy mackerel. It's remarkable what people, do in the name of God. You're absolutely right. What people do, it's not right. I know a lot of people say, look at all those wars fought over, because of religion. And the last study I saw, it's somewhere between 2 and 6% of all the people who have died in wars. It was a war had to do with religion. World War II wasn't, World War I wasn't, a Revolutionary War wasn't, or Civil War wasn't. There's a smattering of those out there. A lot of Middle Eastern stuff, yeah. But it's a very small portion of world events that had to do with that.
Why are people falling away from the church?
In my opinion,
yeah, your opinion.
Because when I was 19, I walked. Why did I walk? I think the reason people walk is the same then as it is now. There's a disconnect. There's a disconnect. You do things by rote. But there's no connection. There's no relationship. There's no relationship. For me, it was the miraculous that woke me up. When I saw miracles, I got my own miracles. I had sciatica, that's gone. I had all kinds of stuff wrong with my body besides the blindness. That's been reversed. I've seen every cancer reversed. I've seen all these things reversed. So the miraculous got my attention, and I realized, and that led me to Bible roulette, and that led me to the smoke coming out of my head, which led me to my vision getting back. So I've had all these experiences, and the music that plays. So I've had all these encounters. Let's call them encounters. And I think what is missing with most people is the encounter. Believe it or not, Gary, I believe you had an encounter that night of examination of conscience and turning to love. You had an encounter. Now, you may not have seen God in it. You may not have seen an angel in it. I don't know. But you still had it, and it still led you in the right direction. So I think what people are missing is that. It's that. And so here's what we look. And when I give talks about this, and if anybody wants me to come give a talk about this stuff, I love giving talks about this.
Why don't you give out your web address?
Sure, and you go to touchedbyheaven.net, touchedbyheaven.net, if you want to get a hold of me. But here's what happens. I'll go to Mass, and I'll hear about 2,000-year-old miracles. And back then, you hear about apostles. They couldn't kill. They would stone them. They'd get back up and walk away. You would hear about angels, and they would open up jail cells, let apostles out. You would hear about miraculous healings and all that. Okay, so right now, all of those things I just mentioned are still going on. There are still angel stories. There are still people. Episode 1 that I have is a guy that should be dead, but God didn't allow it to happen. He literally knocked a bullet out of the air so that Dave wouldn't die. It's an amazing story. Episode 1 of Touched by Heaven. So anyway, so you still have people who aren't allowed to die until they have fulfilled God's purpose. You have angel stories. You have miraculous stories. You have all these experiences that are going on in the world, but are they being talked about within the church right now? No. We're talking about 2,000-year-old stuff. That's boring. If you go back to the time of Moses, you got parting of the Red Sea, you got manna falling from God's throwing food on his people, you've got the burning bush, you have all. Do we think that the people of that era didn't talk about what was going on then? Do we think they only talked about chapter 1 of Genesis or something? Of course they were talking about what was going on in their world right then. Of course, 2,000 years ago, they were talking about the miraculous things the apostles were doing right then, that the angels were doing. It's in the book. Do we think all those things just suddenly stopped when the book was finished? Of course those things are still going on now. My entire passion in life right now is saying, all those things have not stopped. those encounters have not stopped. Take a look at them.